Welcome back to the Sunday's Coming podcast. I'm here as always with Caleb.
Hello.
And this week we're excited to be joined by Tyler Hoff. Glad to have you, man.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tyler and I have worked together for many, many years. And he is a storyteller, a creative, videographer. Is that even how you say it?
Yeah, that's
videographer.
That's the entry level position.
Right. Video. And then you promote yours to the next level.
Yeah.
Photographer. I mean, I believe you have a spread in like Martha Stewart wedding. Is that a real thing? At some point,
really?
So yeah, really.
I thought this was gonna be a joke. That's
no,
awesome.
Not a joke.
Yeah, wide range, cast a wide net.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've done a lot of stuff. Most recently, you are one of the founders of a company called Stucco.
Yeah.
You guys are a creative agency, do a lot of stuff. So big picture, kind of what was the trajectory of sort of creative experiences that led you to saying, hey, we're starting this agency, and then what do you guys focus on, and how does that work?
Yeah, really, I was just hoping to end up on a podcast one day.
You know,
that's my whole career.
Made it.
Like my trajectory was hoping to hang out with Amplio guys.
That's amazing.
I started. I mean, I feel like I started in fourth grade making videos on a video camera in Apple iMovie, right? And we were always like, how can we make this interesting? We play with like reverse versus back, and I feel like we grew up in that era before the internet and before TikTok, where making videos and having things on videos was so interesting to us. So for me, I was like,
well, it was actual work. You couldn't just like do it in your phone for 2 seconds. You had to like open your computer and transfer the file. Did you play DV tape
and the
off of your?
equipment was like, it was like, do I have a FireWire connection?
Exactly.
With like
is it 400
RCA
or is it FireWire?
Like, this is pre-HD. And so it was interesting, just the idea that like the movies that you saw coming out of Hollywood was also something that you could make yourself, but it didn't look anywhere close. So I started there, ended up going to school for media communications, worked a wide range of things during school. I don't know about for you guys, but most people in the creative field, they have this tension of like whether or not to even go to school for it, because you can just learn so much on the job. I was sort of a hybrid in that I went to school for it, but also was working full-time on the job during school. So like I remember my senior year, my professor had contracted me to create a piece for NBC and for like the equestrian games, which are an international event. And I had a 10-minute piece that aired before it. And I remember he was my first film class was my senior year, and he was the professor. And he's like, don't worry about those projects. Just do the NBC thing done. And whenever you get the projects in, we'll just grade them. And we'll figure it out.
So I'll just give you an A on the class if the NBC thing is awesome.
Yeah, like that was the clutch thing. So
that made me think of another fun fact about you is that you were a cam op for the Olympic Games.
Yeah, I was
on
a
the
cam assist.
Bobsled.
Yeah, I was on the sliding
track,
venue.
Right?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like at the time, I was like, maybe I want to go into broadcast TV. Broadcast is interesting. It's cool. I think the Olympics thing was the thing that made me go, yeah, maybe not.
Maybe not.
Because it was. It's these. Each venue has a crew from a different country. Mine was the U.S. crew, and they had the sliding venue.
This was which games was this?
This is Vancouver.
Vancouver.
Yeah.
What year was that?
2010?
Okay, yeah.
Something like that. So, yeah, it was a wild experience in that it's just like every production, like live production from all over the world comes and they send their like team. So like the cross country skiing is all the Nordic production people doing that. And so I had friends over there that had to learn Finnish and like couldn't really know what was going on. But it was just like the scale of it and the way that these people are always on the road made me go, I don't know if I want to be on the road all the time. So, but to get more into the broader picture, I went from, working stuff like that, where I was a photojournalist full-time during school while also shooting random projects, shooting and editing for broadcast stuff. And then worked for a church right out of school in South Florida. That was my first job, which I feel like everybody who has their first job right out of school, it's like sort of like a shocking experience for people because you're like learning how to process real adult relationships while also trying to just get work done. And my default is just to work too much. So setting good boundaries for yourself was something I learned quite a bit then. After a year, I moved to Chicago and I actually ended up working as a media director for a law school in Chicago. So totally different arm there. Started developing online courses, video courses, which was at the time pretty new. That was like 15 years ago, 16 years ago, something like that.
That's very new then.
Yeah. So really like figuring out how do you tell stories, train people, students really at a high level without, doing that, but also working on ads and
That's really interesting because like storytelling as an educational tool, so I just,
with lawyers.
Is it, I'm not sure if that's going to be challenging
So like
or
what's the lawyer piece and like how did that kind of work with the video side?
That
doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say that emails, I learned how to email and only promise exactly what I knew I could do during the law school days, because lawyers will take you up on any sort of hint of something. So if you want to get good at like intentional ambiguity, email some lawyers. They're really good at it. But,
it's amazing.
but yeah, I was really trying to teach professors how to boil their lessons down into asynchronous learning, which is like they watch a 5-minute video and then they do more interactive work rather than them just lecturing for an hour. Which is really a lot like what churches do. Like how do you give a whole lesson within a few minutes? And so, but after that, during that time, actually, I got really bored. Like working for a more corporate type company, you have a lot of time on your hands if you're like a high functioning, like need a lot of busy work type of person. So I started volunteering for Willow Creek, Chicago, downtown, and doing their video stuff. And then out of that, one of the people there was like, hey, the North Shore campus is looking for somebody. You should throw your name in the hat. So I did that and emailed Caleb. And he said, we have people already. We've already hired people.
Really?
That's what I said, yeah.
That's amazing.
And then 3 months later, he's like, actually, that didn't work. What are you up to? So I had actually already quit the law school because I was just like, this is not for me. I need something that has a little more purpose behind it. So I was freelancing, doing random jobs, and that's when Caleb called. So worked there for 5-6 years, started as a video producer and ended as the creative director. And then during COVID, left and kind of reevaluated like, what do I want to do? And I feel like the thing that I've developed over the years that I do better than most people is building out larger campaigns that touch all media areas and doing more holistic marketing and storytelling strategy across the board. So whether it's web to print to video to photography, I've dabbled in all of it. So being able to manage artists that are very specific in each area comes pretty naturally to me. So me and one of my friends, Kelly, launched Stucco in 2021. And shortly after, one of my friends, Chris, joined. And so we have sort of a 3-person partnership, which is great. And like having support from friends and people you worked with long term is the best way to do it. So since then, we've just taken a whole range of projects. And like, I feel like we're still trying to figure it out, like figure out what is our bread and butter and trying a lot of things and just saying yes in this season.
Yeah.
So
that's cool, awesome. I ran into Kelly at Philo this past year, but it had been a while since I seen her and I was like, I know you and I don't remember. I think you were with me and she's like, I was kind of like looking at you and I didn't want you to think I was a creeper. And I was like, oh yeah, oh my gosh, that's right. And I remembered that we had met a while back, but that's awesome. I didn't realize that she had started that with you as well. That's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. We're all co-founders. I've worked with Chris internationally, especially for 14 years now.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, we know each other intimately because we've been in very tough third world situations where, I mean, when one of you is sick, the other one has to take all the burden and take all the work and on themselves. And both of us have had our turn where one of us is sick and the other person has to kind of carry it. So having people you know and trust well, and like, as you guys know, when you're collaborating with somebody is very important in knowing how to trust the other people and know that if you have to take a step back, they're going to be able to carry it. So they're great partners and
that's awesome. That's cool.
Really good people.
There's something special about traveling with people though, especially internationally too, because you're just like, there's this different kind of connection that you build. I don't know. I literally don't know what it is.
You see people for who they are. Like, I've been to like 29 countries. I know the people that I've been to those countries with better than anybody. And whether you like them or hate them, you will learn, you will learn on that trip because who people are in their most stressful times, like how they revert to, like that's definitely who they are. So.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I can think back of so many different things, even youth group and junior high and high school and mission trips, and you're like, I really like these kids, or I really don't like that kid.
Yeah. You learn that Caleb trims his toenails every day because they grow so fast. I'm just kidding. That's not true.
Pain.
Yeah, that's not true.
Tyler and I have never traveled internationally together, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Actually.
Yeah, he's got to hold down the fort.
I know. Someone's got to stay back and like do the regular work. The Sunday is always coming. Tyler's in Greece, and I'm just making sure the Sundays keep happening. It's fine.
I'm just sending pictures. Like, look how great this is.
Oh my gosh,
that's right. Someone has to do it.
That is so cool, though.
Yeah.
So you left Willow and basically went to start Stucco. Kind of right away. As you were kind of thinking about your next like journey post church. Obviously you had been doing video, you had been doing all these different creative things. Like, what was, why Stucco? What was like your, I guess at the time when you started, your kind of main focus, and has that like shifted from where you started to where you guys are at today?
Yeah, I mean, after Willow, I was really thinking about like, what do I want to do? And I was actually interviewing with a few churches, pretty large churches on the West Coast. And again, during COVID, so it was just like a unique environment where everything was virtual, even for them. So I could slot into their team and transition over there if I wanted to. But thinking more and more about what I wanted to do, I think the storytelling techniques that we use at Stucco are more universal to not just like nonprofits and churches. And they're definitely adaptable for profits and for marketing, for actually, large companies. And so to start out, I mean, like anytime you start a company, you kind of take what you can get, right? And then you refine your brand and who your target is over time. But saying yes to start out to everything and figuring it out is really important. That idea of like fake it till you make it, man, YouTube is your best friend for figuring stuff out and faking it. For different projects. But luckily I have a really good network of friends and people I've worked with in the past. So if I don't know it, I probably know somebody who knows it. And I'd much rather ask their professional advice than trying to actually fake it. So that's really a model of what we do. We have our 3 kind of partners to our business, but we have a vast network of creatives where we're like, oh, we have a web project coming up. Let's bring somebody in to develop that or market that versus us trying to do it everything. So we'll scale from having us 3 on a project to having a crew of like 12 to 14 on a video project. So, but to your question, that's sort of always been our model, but what we are shooting, what type of content, really changes over time. But one thing that's been constant is this nonprofit fundraising arm. That's I feel like the most life-giving for all of us. Anytime we're able to go international and tell stories with an intention behind raising funds for those peoples and those partners, those are the most life-giving things for all of us. So I think that's something we always come back to and will always be a part of what we're doing.
Well, that's a perfect segue to, I think, what we want to spend some more time talking about, because the people that hang out with us on the Sundays Coming podcast, they're mostly involved in some kind of creative church adjacent, whether it's someone that's doing video, graphics, music, worship, a Lone Ranger pastor who has to do all of those things and be the video guy, the web guy, and everything. And so, like you just mentioned, one of the big things that you guys are involved with even today is partnering with churches to tell effective stories of what they're doing in the world, whether it's here in Chicago or in South Africa, which you guys are going to here in a few months. So really wanting to kind of unpack a little bit, for someone that's thinking, hey, our church is doing some cool things or we have some cool partnerships. We want to effectively tell this story to our church community, to our broader community. I'd love to just kind of start to unpack with you, like as you're engaging with, let's just use a church as an example, right? If you're engaging with the church for the first time and they want to tell a story, how do you approach that? What are the questions that you're asking? What are the things that you're looking for early on to make sure that's going to go in the right direction and hit the right messaging that's going to communicate it effectively? And I think some of that will be really beneficial to those listening.
Yeah. So anytime that you are telling a story or programming for a service, or like, your church is telling a story, whether that's over the course of a year or the course of a Sunday, you can break that down into 5 minutes. For me, my question is always, what's the behavior we want people to have when they get done consuming this story or experiencing this story. Because there's only a few things that as individuals we can't control other people, but we can, through storytelling, influence what they care about and what they do with that. Behavior is really the action that most people are interested in, right? And that is nonprofits, but it's also for-profits. If you are working for Wendy's and you're shooting a video piece for them, your ultimate desire is for their behavior to be go to Wendy's and get a double cheeseburger, whatever.
Sounds great. Right.
Some fries and a Frosty.
Sounds so good.
Yeah, it's hot out. You can tell. That's what I want. But for me, I'm like, okay, so that's the thing that we can't control is other people's behavior. We also can't control their thoughts and their feelings. But me as a storyteller, I know I have thoughts and feelings about a certain story. So for me, I'm looking at the end result first. And that's really something that we do for every client that comes across in every story. What do we want people to do is the first thing. And then you take a step back and say, okay, they're only going to do something if they feel compelled to it. And if they know enough that they can actually take action. And this is this is very familiar for anybody who's been in therapeutic environments. You have thoughts, feelings, and behaviors for every person in the world. For me, my job as a storyteller in whatever medium is to give them enough knowledge about what the problem is, but also compel them to feel something so that they're inspired to do something next. And we joke about the movie Inception. We've talked about this a lot. Really, that movie, it's about filmmaking. This idea that you're putting somebody into a dream, and if you put them into the dream deep enough, they start to take on this idea as though it's their own. That's what you're doing as a storyteller. And that's what Nolan is doing in Inception. It's this idea that like, if you can get deep enough with somebody and not break that suspension of storytelling, that people will trust what you're saying and trust the story and visuals that they see on screen, then you can start to actually get them to care about the things that matter to you. And that's a very powerful thing. So we don't want to take advantage of that. And that's why for us, we very much focus on what is the real story rather than trying to manipulate it into something that's sensationalized or is going to promote this idea of like a white saviorhood or anything like that. There's a huge responsibility in it, but there's also a huge opportunity to actually affect change for good. So
yeah. So to take your South Africa trip coming up here, for example, when you guys begin to engage with that church and those partners, like what do those first conversations look like? What are you trying to get out of them to begin to shape the direction that you're going?
Yeah, the nice thing is I don't do a ton of the front end stuff. It's great. I like watch from afar while my partners do it. And really what their job is to really define like whose stories are we telling? After we say, okay, what's the end goal? How much do we want to raise? Because for what? Are they building like a ministry center? Are they actually donating food to a certain environments, housing, that type of stuff? So we've set that end goal. We know what that is. For us, it's like, okay, so who within the organization, whether they're leaders or people that you've known for a long time, or if they're new, who has already seen the benefit of that, what we're going to do for other people, who has already seen that in their lives? Okay, who are the right people to speak on that, who have compelling stories that people can empathize with? And how do we tell that in a way that is going to actually, again, push people to that end result? So the first step is finding out and indicating whose story best represents what you're trying to tell. The life change possibilities if they take the next step in this other area or to scale up this type of service. That's the first step. And then once you can do that a lot of different ways. You could storyboard it based on very little details. For us, we like to interview the actual people that will be documenting their story.
Like an advanced interview before you even start.
Yeah,
that's, I think, Zoom really important. Because I think, you think of, again, just practically like that person in the church that they're trying to get something delivered for Sunday. And they're like, I'm just going to shoot the interview, show up at 10, boom, and you go.
Yeah.
And you don't really know what you're going to get, or even you might discover, I've seen this happen in your work, Tyler, where there's a part of the story that we didn't even know when we went into it that was like so much better than what we thought it was going to be, but we found it because you did a pre-interview and really almost let that kind of unfold naturally before you actually then figure out, okay, what does that final story look like?
Yeah. Well, and it also gets people comfortable with you and your process. Like when you're on the ground in these different cultures, first off, they've never seen cameras this big because they're like, that could feed our whole village for 13 weeks or something like that. But also, which sounds horrible, but also there's a whole ethical, you should ask me about that later, the whole ethical side of like us doing high production value where the production costs would actually just cover what all these people need, right? And being very aware of that going into it. You can talk about that later, but I've lost the plot. I don't even know what I was talking about. But
pre-interview.
Yeah, the reason you do this is so that they get comfortable with you, but also they actually can start to think about their story. Believe it or not, most people have not thought about their own story. And so them being able to do that is super important. Them being able to interface with you so they're not really intimidated and nervous when you're on the ground. But also for you to figure out what's the language barrier, what are the logistics we're going to need to consider when we go into these places. And also creatively, like what visual representations of their story can we plan so that logistically our partners on the ground can make it happen. We were in Nicaragua a year and a half ago, and we really couldn't do a lot of pre-interview stuff. So instead of doing it beforehand, we did the first 2 days on the ground. We went around to all of the people whose stories we were telling, and we did pre-interviews with them in person through a translator. And it was only through that we were like, oh, this guy is a new, ex-drug addict, now turned Christian, has been going to church every day for 2 years and has decided he wants to get baptized. That happened 2 weeks before we got there. We didn't know it. And we're like, well, we should do it while we're here. Like visually, what a great opportunity to show what's actually taking place on the ground here. But things like that like ability to flex and change what your plan is essential to these types of stories.
Just expecting the story to be unfolding in real time. It's not something that's like set in stone even as you're planning it. I think I love what you said a minute ago about people not even knowing their own stories. Not that they don't know their stories, but they haven't been forced to like articulate it in a sequential way or to try to articulate it in a way that shares it with others. Like I think that's really important whether you're doing some international work or even just interviewing someone in your church community to give them the opportunity to kind of work through that and process through that. I think you're just giving an opportunity for so much more effective communication for them to whoever that they're sharing with. And I think that can be, that sounds
and it's
non-negotiable.
It's not like these people are maybe have never done this or it's not normal on-screen talent that you're just bringing in somebody who's very comfortable with that. This is like, ooh, this is awkward. Also, the story could be very emotional to those people, whatever happened. It's a whole thing. And so to be able to get those people comfortable is it makes a ton of sense and things that like I wish that I did more of those things when we were in church because we just didn't. We were
running gun.
We would show up. We're busy. We're doing our thing. All right, plop in this person's house. Tells your story, and then
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of time, and if you're the only person doing it, it makes sense that you wouldn't do it. Like what's the cost to benefit ratio of me doubling the interview time for this project?
Twice as long.
But I will say it's significant because if you sit down first time with somebody who's never had an interview, you'll get 45 minutes to an hour of footage for your 3 to 4 minute video, and it will be a nightmare to cut together. But if you can even craft the right questions, and ideally, what we've started doing for some of our projects is actually scripting it for them. And especially when there's language barriers or something, hiring a voiceover person to do this, but making sure that that's a story that they've signed off on, just ethically wanting to know that it's accurate. It consolidates and really opens up the creativity you're allowed to have in those moments where, visually I want to show this, but they, instead of saying that in 30 seconds, they said it in 2.5 minutes. So I really, I'm losing detail. You have much more control over the tightness and compelling nature of the story when you do that type of work beforehand. So
that's interesting. What are some of the pitfalls that you see, or whether you've experienced them or like you see them as you are working with different organizations where they're coming in and saying, hey, we're going to tell this story. And like, what are things that you would encourage people to avoid as they're approaching that endeavor?
Diarrhea.
That is
no, but verbal diarrhea.
Don't drink the water.
Yeah, don't drink the water.
I thought you were talking
don't
about.
Don't worry, man. I carry a pharmacy in my backpack.
Don't eat washed vegetables. because you never know where the water came from that they washed it with. That was my mistake in Nicaragua. The last couple days were not great for me, but verbal diarrhea. Like when people are asked a question, it's kind of like me right now. Like you guys ask me a question, I'm going to say everything that comes to mind and give you as much context as possible, unless I know my story well enough that I can dial it in.
Yeah, self-editing, right?
Yeah, and most people haven't done that.
Yeah.
Most people have only thought about their story in their head, or they have repressed it enough that they have not thought about it at all, and they would rather not talk about it. So knowing that that's a likely outcome for people that you have not prepped to actually talk about it, or given questions that really hit on those talking points. You know, you can have an hour-long interview, but if you ask the right questions, you're taking the first 2 sentences of everybody's answer and the last one of their answer and putting it together. And knowing that that's going to be the case when you go into it is going to save you a lot of time.
It's like editing sermon clips.
Yeah, it sure is.
It really
Just fast forward to where the underscore started and then cut there. That's where
nobody
that's
loves
where
to
the
hear
best
themselves
point
talk
is
more
gonna
than a
be.
pastor, right? Yeah.
Free social media tip. Fast forward to where underscore starts.
Oh my gosh.
Cut there.
And it's got to be hard too, because like we live in a world of Instagram Reels, TikToks, and what we see is very superficial.
Yeah.
Right? Like everything we see, I just go, is that real? It's a fun and entertaining thing to watch, but how much of that is staged? I mean, anything you watch today. And I've seen some, videos that were shot in churches or wherever, and I go, how much of the emotion is forced, right? I think sometimes it can come across like superficial or fake in some ways. Like, how do you feel like you tell that story? And maybe that's in editing, maybe that's in the questions you ask, maybe that's in that pre-interview. I don't really know. But doing it in a way that doesn't make it feel like you're forcing this emotion out of somebody or on to the viewer who's, seeing or hearing the story for the first time.
Yeah, it just depends. I mean, like I said, you have a lot of control and power as a storyteller, and it's not a responsibility you should take lightly, because you really can. I mean, if you're shooting 2 cameras on an interview, you can make somebody say whatever you want. And so that really comes down to whoever is behind the camera asking the questions. Like a good interview should feel at the end like you just had a great therapy session. You should have a weight lifted as a subject. You should have weight lifted off of you, not a burden put upon you. And so for you as the interviewer, as a producer of somebody of stories, your goal is to be empathizing with them in real time and thinking, what is this person feeling by me asking this question? And then how do you graciously tee them up well? I say this to most of the people I ask questions to. If you don't know the answer to the question I'm asking, then I'm asking the wrong question, because I should know your story even better than you and represent you in a positive and affirming way. And so for you, like as I'm empathizing with you, I should be able to see when you're about to crack or get emotional. And you have 2 choices. You can either pull back if you think that person can't handle it and bring levity to it, or you can see in them that that's something they really do want to share, that this is a good process for them, understanding their story and what they went through. And you lean in and say, that must have been really hard in this way. I'm proud of you for doing this, and affirming them through that. And that emotion versus, oh, wow, you really made some bad choices, didn't you? There's different types of emotional connection, right? And one of them is affirming and uplifting, and one of them is judgmental and negative. And so your job as a good interviewer, specifically in a church space, is to be uplifting people and affirming them. And that doesn't mean there can't be tension. There has to be tension for a story to be compelling. But as an interviewer, again, if you're doing it all, you're running the cameras, you're probably worried about that. It's so hard to be empathizing with somebody.
Yeah.
But for me, I would rather sacrifice the technical aspects of an interview in order to get the words and dialogue, because ultimately you could get B-roll or graphics or something to go over the top. So
Yeah.
That's interesting. And this, specific to this South Africa trip, like what's the, I don't know anything about it. What's the context, or like, what's the goal, I guess, for this trip that's upcoming for you guys? Yeah. Cause you said you're going in September. Or something like that.
Yeah. End of September. We've partnered with the church for like 9 years, maybe even more. I've gone to like 8 countries with them, because their model for mission work is they vet, instead of vetting an individual to go and witness to a certain area, they go and they vet existing organizations that are doing good work really hard, and they make sure that they're a sustainable, organization, that they're doing things the right way. And then they give a no strings attached gift to them every year. And so they use their run up to Easter as their like gifting time. And so our goal for the last 8-9 years has been to create a compelling series of video stories from different countries to compel people to give in a like large scale. Like we're talking $800 to $1 million.
That's awesome.
Like it's a huge scale. But for us, we're like, take 2% of that potential offering and enable us to go into this space that is difficult and hard and tell stories that will help the audience that is going to be doing the giving, that these people are just like me. They're just like us, but they need my help. Yeah. I have gotten help and I have privilege by living in this country that is prosperous, that these people don't have the opportunity for. And so for us, that's where it starts. Of like, okay, that's our end goal. Understand the organization and then plan out 3 to 4 stories leading up with the culmination of all of them coming on that last Sunday to actually compel people to give. And that's a very easy, like sounding, straightforward goal. It's not as hard as like something like we want this many first-time attenders to show up, right? Sure. That's so amorphous and difficult to measure. But a financial goal is very easy to measure. So for us, like what we're doing now, we're in pre-production to find the right 4 stories. And once we do that, really like, I think that they're building resource and ministry centers that help enable people to do a variety of things. So we have one story that represents different arms of each of those ministry centers. And then we'll do pre-interviews, we'll script, we'll write loose shot sheets. And then when we get in country, we'll either beforehand or real time. We've had different projects for different results. I'll either be scripting in country as it's happening, or we'll do it beforehand and know exactly what the shot sheets we're going to hit are. So, and then we get in country, we'll either set up an interview time or just set up the right B-roll moments that we're doing. So, but it's all natural, normal stuff. That's the thing that's interesting about these stories that we're telling. Everybody, when we get on, they're like, so it's literally just what I do every day. It's like, yeah, that's the goal. But like, we're controlling the time of day and we're controlling the action of who's in the shot, who's not, how much of it is happening. Those are the things that, take more coordination than you'd think. It's not just showing up with a camera and rolling. So
no, I all I'm thinking about is the logistics of all of that and the nightmare of, especially if you have a decent sized crew, going on site. And when you're doing it, like, are you working with those specific like international partners that these churches are? So Compassion International or Convoy of Hope or whoever you're doing. So are you talking with them and trying to set this up in the same like way that you would be for the person you're interviewing, or is the person you're interviewing like the person in the village who's got a new well, and they're, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. It really does. But we're always partnering with the organization that's on the ground and like trusting them. In South Africa specifically, there's if you watch the movie District 9, that area where all the aliens are placed, that's actually a neighborhood. They just digitally removed all the people and replaced them with aliens. But all the setting is exactly the same. It is a huge slum where people who were put into camps during apartheid are all now flocking to the more urban cities because that's where they can receive aid. Okay. And so I think it's the largest slum in the world. Wow. But it's just like, there's no greater disparity than in South Africa, where you have these really nice resorts, beautiful, facilities. And then across the highway is just like crazy amounts of tin shack slums. And it's people's permanent housing, and it's growing by like 180 people a day. Last time that I was there, that's what they told me. It's probably growing faster now. Wow. But we wouldn't be able to go in there because gangs run that place. But it's only the equity that the church and the pastors have for helping people that allow us to have the security and stability to bring all this equipment in and film these stories with people and be up on top of these tin shacks where everybody can see where they're advertising and come take all this stuff from us. But only through the respect that they have for the work that's being done there are we allowed to actually go in. And so that's a critical piece of trust that we always have to build with the partners on the ground of like helping them understand the scale of what we're doing too. So
have you had any like sketchy things happen in all of your trips, whether it's there or elsewhere? Because it's like that feels like it's has a potential of having high risk.
I mean, I'm really tall. No, our partners are really like, I've never felt uncomfortable. Let's see. The last time we were in India, the only sketchy time I felt was they put us on a boat, and one of my business partners, Chris, was on the boat as well, taking videos of me freaking out. But it was like 15 to 17 foot waves, and we're in this rickety boat. Clearly, the guys that they had hired thought it would be fun to mess with the American filming team. And I'm like hugging the camera so that I like doesn't get splashed and wet. Also, we could go out to this fishing boat and get like really cool shots of this father and son fishing with nets. And that's the sketchiest I felt. And I remember just like
whatever it takes to get the shot, though.
Dude, I mean, like I'm not like a weak dude, but I felt weak just trying to keep the camera steady in these like huge waves. And like, I'm completely tuning out what's happening and just looking at the monitor, like, and realizing, then you like look up and you're like, oh, I'm kind of seasick. And that's truly the sketchiest I felt. I was like, I could go overboard any minute. Like, I know how to swim, but this camera doesn't.
I will just say, man, the
ocean, at that point, let it go. It's
fine. The ocean is quite an incredibly powerful thing. It is, last time I was near it, I think I was calling my wife and I'm just like, these waves could kill me. I jump in this water and I'm dead. Like the power of it is, it's quite incredible to me.
Yeah. Well, there's a series on, I think it's HBO, 100-Foot Wave. It's about the big wave surfers. I watched it. It's insane.
Dude. Because that's in Africa, I think.
It's in Spain. Portugal.
Yes. What's it called again?
Navarre? Nazare?
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of it.
It's crazy.
It's, the scale of it, you just realize how much power is out. It's not, but like that's a great example. You know, with any story, you should be able to boil it down to a single line. In Hollywood, they call it a log line. Like, name your favorite movie. Ready, go.
Ooh.
Honestly, I love Inception. It's like it is one of my favorite movies.
So, like, you should be able to boil that down when you're pitching it, even into one line. I don't feel like I would do it justice, but like for that one, it's like a man looks to release the memory of his wife by also reconnecting with his daughter, and really, you should be able to just do that in one line. And that's how they pitch things. And then from there you can build it up into like a treatment, which is more of like a single pager that goes into more detail. But as you're doing that, as you're setting out somebody's story, the thing that we're always thinking about is what is the visual metaphor that goes with the words of the story that are being told. So many interviews in churches are interviews like this, like just watching people talk. And for me, the actual emotion connection is going to be from the visuals that you show people. And so that's the big piece I feel like we're sort of dancing around, haven't talked about, is the work isn't in the interview. Like, that's where you get the content, but what you show people, this is the magic of video storytelling. What you're hearing and what you're seeing should be different. And when you cut back to the person actually talking, should have some level of impact because of the way you edit those images together. And you've got pacing, you've got lens languaging, you've got proximity with your subject. All of that stuff speaks to how your audience is going to absorb that story and see and feel and think about the thing that's happening so that their behavior changes. And if you don't stack that well, if you don't like empathize with the actual story, you're not going to achieve that. And in Nolan's world, that dream would be shattered, right? Something's off. So I don't believe this is real. Where you see a shadow of something, those are all risks that you have when you tell these stories. And even being too serious, like, this isn't real because it's so dramatic. That's
I don't believe that the drama is appropriate to the moment.
Exactly. So those are all things that you've just got to keep in mind. It's a dance, and it takes a lot of editing and refining to figure that out. So
I think as I kind of reflect on what you were saying, and think about how this applies to someone who's making videos of stories or even sharing stories, maybe with their congregation on Sunday morning, or even thinking about, they're writing an email to share something with their church, like taking it seriously and preparing well and thoughtfully crafting what that message is. I think that's just so important to not neglect, and making sure you're bringing it, if it's something that's serious, like bringing the effort that it deserves to what you're trying to share.
The effort that it deserves.
Right.
I like that, because I think in the same way we were saying, we could just, set our camera up, walk in the door, film it, shoot, after an hour, walk out and, go to our editing bay and start working. The intentionality and the effort that something like that deserves, shows in the end product always. Just as people are, going along. One of the things I was just thinking about was like, so if I'm a listener, I was never a, creative video guy in a church. I ended up on a bunch of the shoots and stuff like that, but I never got to do the fun.
They just made you carry cases.
Yeah, I just got to carry the cases, man.
You need that guy. You need him.
I don't want to be that guy. What are those called? Gaffer? Grip?
No.
Depends on where you're at. If you're in the,
I don't know.
All the gaffers of grip out there are like, what are you talking about? We have an important job.
What's it? Best Boy.
I don't know what that
Best Boy does it. Yeah, Best Boy is like lighting. Like that's
All right. You just call me Best Boy.
But like if you're doing touring shows, I did that from when I was 16 to like 20 and toured with like John Mayer and Jeremy Camp and like those types of guys, like Trans-Siberian Orchestra. You were just utility.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
just,
what they call you.
You roll cases to and from the semi.
Yeah, buddy.
And if you drop anything, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it is.
Gosh.
Learn a lot.
John Mayer? What did you do for John Mayer?
I was a sound
utility.
assistant tech.
Really?
And then, so like, make sure that their ears are all there. And
Dude.
like, but like that was, it's like assistant work and it's only within a certain region. So it's like in the it's funny because I didn't even listen to John Mayer when I was with, and I was like, this guy's pretty good. but then, again, this is like years ago.
Yeah.
Like, so, but like that type of experience really, it sort of changed the way I look at gear too.
Yeah.
I think that's a big pitfall with video producers and people in churches. They think the gear is the next step to making them better.
Dude.
And
so
this is
good.
funny, me telling you guys,
Preach.
the gear
You're
company,
pushing it, man.
that doesn't matter. If you can tell a good story and with anything really.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So to segue into kind of what I was starting to say, I think people who are listening could hear that and go, my church doesn't have enough money to either send me or an amazing production company with a full crew who's going to do it way better than me overseas to go do this thing. I have to tell Mary's story in her house of how she, whatever it is, right? I think it could be easy for a creative person to just go, it is what it is, man. It's just Mary's story. It's not amazing. I get to go to Nicaragua or Greece or South Africa to film incredible B-roll. I'm just filming
And I'm not using
Mary
a Red
mowing her
Raptor.
lawn in her front yard, right? Like there's like, what do I do? How do you feel like you use that same like intentionality that you're talking about for these large shoots, large scale things, for massive campaigns for churches or nonprofits or for-profits, and bring it back to the scale of, I'm just a lone video dude at my church. How am I supposed to tell this story and make it as amazing as what you're talking about when it's me, myself, and I? I'm the video editor. I'm the best boy in the grip and the gaffer or whatever. And I have to edit it all, and I gotta do it in 2 weeks for my,
Or 2 days.
Or
Let's
2
be
days.
realistic.
Yeah,
2 weeks,
yes,
that's cushy right there.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the interesting thing about all of this stuff is the more experience you have, the more you have an eye and understanding of how to do that stuff and make it interesting. Like we could shoot a story in 2 days and make it great
On a phone.
Yeah,
Totally. It's not all about what the gear is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in, most of these international projects, we're using available and natural light because flying with lighting and most of these places, there's no power. Like, if anything, we're shaping it with some diffusion and some like reflection. But really, what I would challenge people to do is decide what style is going to achieve your desired result best. For us, we have a higher production value for this church that we're going to South Africa for because that's their audience can't see the production. They don't want it to be jittery and shaky. Like it's like, a mid-20s person's travel video, you know? But for you, that might be the vibe, You might want to actually, bring your production level back because it makes it feel more authentic. So really, you've got to lean into what resources you have available and optimize that. And most of that has to do with taste. Caleb and I sort of coined this term when we worked together, is this taste always trumps tech. And that's really true. Like, if you want to go full minimal, that's the cheapest way to do anything, right? But if you're doing things the right way and figuring out the fundamentals of lighting and shots and storytelling, and then from that point on, it's marketing and it's creating the graphic for it, understanding what you're trying to go for, and then going really hard in that direction is what's going to actually give you the best results anyways. So, if you're strapped for cash, figure out what method you can pull off and then lean into it as hard as you can. I look at like the show Fargo, which I don't recommend. I've watched some of it. It's set in like Minnesota or something.
I recommend it.
It's North Dakota.
You say North Dakota? Yeah, I can't even remember. But like, I probably should have known that geography.
It's a very brutal show.
But like, it's the most like desolate Midwest place ever, right? And if you watch the original movie, it's just like they made that look interesting. So I don't think everybody's living there. So if you've got something to work with, if you aren't living there, and even there it looks great. So I think you've got to lean into your terrain, your locations, and like really just look at how to make things interesting. And that's really our job as storytellers, is take everyday items and experiences and make it, people see it in a way that they've never seen it before, even though they pass it the same thing every day.
Yeah. I would say that to people who live in, like, I would love one day to either live near the ocean or the mountains, right? And every time I go to Colorado, Montana, somewhere amazing, and I just go, gosh, man, look at this. Like, this is just unbelievable. Yeah. And they're like, I just drive it like every day to work. And I'm like, well, I drive by cornfields every day to work. And you might think that's pretty, but it gets old after a while. And you put it in the back of your mind and you just kind of pretend that it's not there. Yeah. So to be able to use the landscape around you. And like, I was thinking, like, as you were talking to, do you feel like it's changed as gear has become more accessible and cheaper? Like my iPhone can shoot amazing looking content compared to 10 years ago. I could buy a drone today for not that much money at Costco. Yeah. And I can get great looking footage for it. And it costs less than $1,000 or less than $500 in some places. Do you feel like that's hurt like the way that you tell stories? Yeah. All of that. Because it's awesome because it makes things more accessible for people who haven't had the opportunity to go do that stuff, to go, oh, I could take this little Blackmagic pocket camera and I could shoot some great looking content for $1,000, body camera or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because I was in college when the 5D Mark II was released. It was the first like large sensor sort of look where you can get that Hollywood look without the Hollywood expense. And I remember our college said that we couldn't use those because you had other cameras available to you to rent. And I remember being like, well, I'm going to use it anyways. And because rules are made for somebody else. That's the theme of my life that I probably should. Yeah, no. Some rules are made for other people. But I'm happy to be a socially conscious citizen.
I agree with that. Yeah. I don't like rules, man.
Hey, the rule is not aligned with my vision.
Yeah.
And so,
but like some rules like, oh, this spiral staircase is roped off. Come on. Like, you can't expect me to not to go. The best shot's probably up there. No, but like, I remember seeing that and being like, I'm going to do it anyways and show like why this matters. So to some extent, like I've grown up in my sort of storytelling with the gear as it's become more and more accessible to get that quality look. So it's hard for me to remove myself from that and say that gear doesn't matter. But the older I get, the more I'm like, oh, these directors are shooting at f11 and f16. They don't care about shallow depth of field. They don't care about sensor size. And however you feel about the Star Wars prequels, they were shot on the 2/3 inch sensor digital cameras that were.
I feel great about them.
Yeah, you do. You love them. I feel like they're aging better than they were you?
Bro,
even
did I
at the
tell you
time
that I
then?
went to see episode 1 in the theaters on May
Of course
the
you did.
4th?
It's
Really?
your favorite
It was
movie.
amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure you loved it.
So good.
Still
I
trying
took
to
my
awesome.
9-year-old. It was so fun.
Still trying to figure out the protagonist and who it was, but you know,
There's multiple.
is it Obi-Wan? That's the problem.
No.
Anyway,
you just are not. You're not.
This is an
You're not
age-old
allowing
discussion.
Lucas to expand your mind.
That's right.
Anyway,
Yeah, I
we've
don't
been
think
arguing
I'm
about
wrong.
this for 10 years.
That's
Yeah,
so funny.
Yeah, it's been a while. But yeah, when it comes to like the gear side of things, there is again, it all depends on your end goal and your end result. I see so many things on forums of like, what camera should I buy? What do you think about these lenses? And for me, I'm like, well, first off, if you have a paying client, just rent it for just that project, because cameras are some of them are aging great, but indefinitely there's going to be new cameras coming out
All the time.
and so unless you're shooting so much that you can warrant the cost of that, for like the next year, you're going to be shooting every day or every week that the rental cost doesn't, wait out. Just rent. Because then you don't have to worry about the maintenance and all that stuff. But, and it's so affordable to do so. But if I say that, but at the same time, like, we shoot on the Canon, cinema line for the most part, and everything from like the brand new C500 Mark II or Mark III, I can't remember which mark it is, to DSLRs. And like Nicaragua, I was talking about, Nicaragua's in a very difficult governmental state where if they see you with more than a DSLR, they will confiscate it and they will probably put you in jail. So we went in with DSLRs and we shot the whole project for that year on DSLRs. And I think the project's one of our best ones that we've done because you're more scrappy, you're more flexible. Do you lose production value? Sure, but your ability to tell a story is not changed by that. You just set up a cardboard square and do a puppet show and have you make yourself tell a good story. It's the same exact thing as narrowing somebody's frame of view so they see what you want them to see in the depth and the lighting and the like storytelling moment edited together, so that actually have some sort of emotional impact. And that stuff it's all a means to an end. So the older I get, the gear matters less and less.
Yeah.
Because I realize what people are paying you for, whether you're working a full-time job at a church or otherwise, is for your working process and the way you see things. And so the gear matters less and less in that way.
Yeah. And it is so hard because, before we even started recording, I was joking about wanting new cameras for this podcast. And it's just like, it's a hard thing because I think, that will make things better. It will make things whatever. And it might make some
make
workflow
processes easier.
Sure, it might, but like,
benefits.
do I need that to continue doing?
Well, so that's a great example. I would say like if someone is kind of wrestling through that, it's like, don't let the gear that you want to have someday stop you from doing something right now.
Yeah.
Like getting really good at stuff that's not ideal will make you amazing when you do have really good tools. You know, all those skills just translate to make you even more effective down the road. And so it's like, don't feel like you just can't do anything. Like do what you can do and continue to grow in that way. And like the further you go down that road, the more likely you are probably to have access to those tools.
Yeah, I've shot tons and tons of weddings, like literally hundreds of weddings. And all it does is make me a better natural light, DP.
I'm sure.
It helps me understand how to shape it. What are the natural elements where's the concrete versus where's the light, what type of foliage is around. It helps me see things in a way that actually makes it look cinematic, even when it's not. And you're only going to get better at that through time. And I'm not using the best gear when I'm shooting weddings. Like I'm shooting on the stuff that's going to be the lightest to carry because my back's going to hurt by the end of the day. So, all of that stuff, if you can take a course or something on the fundamentals of cinematography so that when it comes to that side of things, the gear doesn't matter at all. But that's not to say that gear doesn't matter for who your audience is, but the style and like the
You
style.
can implement the fundamentals.
But the fundamentals, you can scale it from there. And really, if you're getting traction, like the work you're doing is an investment into your future no matter what. So if you're doing it with no gear or the best gear, you've got to have a compelling thing that is going to draw people. So you can draw people with both. That makes sense. That was a little twisty, but
It's
you
like
get it.
Inception.
I like that.
Yeah,
It's like Inception.
kind of. But like you look at this podcast, if we were using our iPhones and just holding them up, one, you're not going to get the distance where it feels like we're in people's ears where they feel like they know us well, the proximity. But you're also going to have an audio quality that people are going to be like, this is hard to listen to, right?
Yeah.
So gear does matter on some quality level. And when I'm talking to clients, we're trying to sell high production value, high excellence visual work because people take it more seriously and they subconsciously say that's a legit company or that's a legit cause. When the production value is beautiful and people are compelled by the imagery.
Yeah.
It's like, I say this to a lot of people. It'd be like if the president of the United States did the State of the Union from his selfie camera on his iPhone and just like hopped on real quick and streamed it live.
Yeah.
It'd be, what it's saying about that message is it's not worth putting the time and effort into it. What you have now is every network airs the same thing, same feed. There's a huge pomp and circumstance of everybody walking in together. The president is shaking hands with supporters and hecklers alike. And then, once everybody sits down, that's when they all, are able to actually zoom in tight. They've got high level of production because that message matters. And so you've got to decide where are the points that are willing to invest in. And for all the video people out there working at churches, if you're looking for budget help, ask your pastor, is the things you're trying to say worth the quality that you won't buy from me? Do you want what you're saying to be taken seriously? Because the production value will help do that. It subconsciously helps people go, this is legitimate. I will listen to this.
I mean, that is a huge question because I could just think of all those different scenarios of me going, this is why I need that. But the me casting vision for why I needed a new camera or whatever. Ultimately, in the same way, as you're describing your story making process of going, what's the end result? And going, well, if the end result is we want people online or on social media or blah, 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 YouTube to see this and not have it be a distraction because the next video that they're going to click is going to be super high quality and high production value and it's going to be fast and whatever. Do those things lead to the end result of what we're trying to do on a Sunday morning, whether it's through social media clips of a sermon or whatever. And this is the reason why something would look better or worse. But that's a hard thing to do, especially if you're creative or low in the totem pole, which is often the case.
And again, I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's not something that you necessarily do all at once either. It's something that you demonstrate, intentionality and thoughtfulness and like make little steps with what you have. And when you take steps with what you have opportunity to do more. And, it's like we said a minute ago, don't let the fact that you're not all the way there yet mean I'm not going to try. I think that's really the key thing to take away from is that
and do the
intentionality.
Absolute best with the stuff and the gear that you have, right?
Well, and it's kind of like it ties in with job security too. Like, when it comes to production value, rent something for a project or do a passion project that shows what you're capable of. And then the people who are the decision makers, they will feel the vacuum of when you don't have that tool, right? It's the same way as personnel. If you make yourself absolutely essential to the creative process of your church, or even the storytelling and pastoral, because again, storytelling is that powerful that you have a pastoral presence in your church. If you make yourself indispensable, they will feel the gap. And so you got to get to this point where if you ask for something that is going to be critical to your job, they'll sense that, okay, this person's legit. They have a good voice in our staff. They have a good voice in trust. In our congregation. If they're saying this is necessary, it probably is. Yeah. And that's, again, over time, that's what you do.
Yeah. Well, that's where I love hey, go rent the thing that you want to
try it out.
Try it out. I think a perfect example is during COVID, world shuts down. All of a sudden, we're pre-recording every service, right? Now, all of a sudden, the communications team, marketing team, whoever, the video team, for all the post-production shows up to help with all this stuff. And we stop using our broadcast cameras on sticks in the back of the room. And all of a sudden we can walk around anywhere we want. We can put our cameras anywhere we want. We can use DSLRs. And all of a sudden, I remember this conversation. And the first week they go, why does this look so much better?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, we're shooting in 24 on these cameras in this glass, and we're up close and we're getting all this stuff. And they're like, this looks amazing.
Yeah.
And I remember then everybody get used to that for 3, 4, 5, however many months it was.
Yeah.
And we go back to in-person service and they're like, oh,
Yep.
this doesn't look as good anymore. Brother, But it was so true. Like I literally remember them going, why doesn't this look like the way it does? Like we want to go back to that. I'm like, if you want to do that, this is what we need.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, okay, we'll just go ahead and stay with what we have.
Yeah, for sure.
But that was a perfect example of all of a sudden like the visual aspect. And I remember an executive pastor asking me when I was pushing for camera upgrades. And he said, if I didn't know the weekend that you're going to upgrade these cameras, would I know and would I notice if I'm watching in person or online? If you did not tell me this is the weekend we're doing it, would I be able to tell a difference? And there was a couple times I was like, absolutely. And there was other moments in my career that I was like, probably not. Here's the reason why we should still, or, and not, but like, that's a very good like marker, I think, in people's push for something new, especially in the creative space, to go, this is what you will notice and why this is going to be, so much better, because it's hard to wrap your head around anything other than just a spreadsheet of dollars and cents.
Yeah. And I think the best leaders too will be looking at the person asking and say, not only will I notice, but is this person's life going to be significantly better, or their time going to be better spent?
Yeah.
Am I caring for this person by giving them the thing that they're asking for?
Yeah.
But I remember that COVID week as we were all waiting in our auditorium to know if we were going to be shut down that weekend. And I remember I was like jazzed. I was like, this is gonna be awesome. Let's go. I was like, I have
crazy
plans.
It was like, we're gonna grab some styrofoam and we're gonna do this.
I was like, let's pull a styrofoam now. Let's get it pulled out. I'm gonna move all the sticks onto Ronins, and we're gonna do this thing. But yeah,
good times.
Yeah, and you guys built like a
room,
COVID room.
Eventually, yeah. After like 6 months, we were like, we should probably make this more permanent.
It was like, I think it was May. Yeah, whatever. January.
It felt like 6 months.
February to May.
6 months of trauma, all in 6 weeks.
It brings back so many. Feels so far away.
Yeah.
Now.
But that's just a great example. I just got to give Tyler huge props for the vision on that. Is like, we know we're going to be doing this for a while. We know that we want to be effective at communicating what we're doing in the services in the context of having to be pre-recorded. We also need to make it really easy for our staff to do good work, like really easily for the
volunteers.
And volunteers, everything. And so it was like, all right, instead of just sort of adapting what we would normally do on our stage, take all the parameters off and build the right thing for what you need in this season. And like, it was...
When it goes back to what I was saying, like, what's the end result? What's the end desire? And church is for people to feel known and connected with. When you have a room full of people, you connect with the person next to you. But when you don't have that, you've got to connect with the person on video, which is so much harder. So
especially if you can see they're in a room.
That's empty.
A room that's empty, you know?
So you can't adapt a live audience-based broadcast. That's the most exciting thing about live concerts that you go to, is the IMAG that's like floating behind somebody's head, or they're shooting the reactions of the people to the artist.
Yeah.
The artist, we all kind of heard that. So we'll see some of that performance if you're Taylor Swift.
And what I love about that is we took all the things that you would visually cue and see like something's not right, meaning, why is there no one in the room? Why is the room, whatever? And we said,
it's nighttime. Why?
Yeah, why is it? Yeah, why are they shooting in the middle of the night? And it's like, no, we create a space where it looks correct. Like what is happening in this space feels appropriate, and it feels like natural and organic,
and it achieves what the audience really needs, and that's where you meet them. So
that's crazy.
Okay.
This is so good. I think there's so many like things for me, not even like being in that space when I was in church, but to go, man, like I hope that people listening are able to go, oh, that's a different way of looking at that, or my perspective needs to shift a little bit about my small projects that aren't cool, that I have to do all the time, and to go, how much more intentionality can I put in as a church creative leader in my space to make whatever I have with whatever gear I have and the people that I have around me, like as great as humanly possible.
I think most people think that this push to what is a big project versus small project is equipment. And while there is some equipment scale, process
That's really
Yeah.
good.
is what pushes you to the higher
really good.
scale.
Yeah.
And that is universal. If you're in the church world and you want to break out of the church world into content, it's the same thing in marketing, even more so in the corporate world, because there's so much. So I don't know, I want to say there's more politics in the corporate world, but similar politics to the church world in corporate world. And your process and how assured you are in that is what gets you hired for that stuff, and what makes people experience it and go, we should hire them again.
Well, what it goes back to is what we were talking about a minute ago is do they feel like they can trust you?
Yeah.
The process is building that trust. It's building that foundation. It's demonstrating at each step that you have a clear idea of what you're doing and a clear plan. And that makes people feel secure and safe, and like what they're receiving is valuable, and they want to work with you again.
Yeah.
And I think like we were saying, that applies to you whether you're a contractor or freelance or you are on staff.
Yeah.
That level of trust is key.
To go back to the thoughts, feelings, behaviors, like how do I want people to behave? Okay, so what does my story need to make them think and feel? And food is easy because I want to make this look as appetizing as possible, right? In a cool and funny way that makes you remember it.
Yeah.
But, fundraising for a cause means you really have to get into people's intimate stories. And intimacy is what, who was it? There's a photographer and he was a war photographer, and his famous saying was, if your pictures aren't good enough, then you're not close enough. It's the same for all storytelling, whether that's a visual medium or just an audio medium. If it's not good enough, you need to get closer to what people are saying and their lives and the visuals and how much intimacy they're actually allowing you into to make it a compelling story.
That's good, man. Well, thanks for sharing that.
great.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think maybe people can even go back and listen again and kind of just reflect. I think there's so many different nuggets that hit at different people in different roles, responsibilities, seasons of their career, and where they're at in ministry. But yeah, man. If people want to follow you or find out more about Stucco, like what do they do? Yeah,
I mean, you can follow on Instagram at We Are Stucco. Our website's the same, www.wearestucco.com. I don't post that much on Instagram because I'm posting for everybody else. So, but I'm just at Tyler Hoff, and follow along, ask questions.
We'll get to see some content from South Africa here in a few months.
Yeah, I think the last thing up there was from India.
Nice.
We've been to a lot of places. So
It's cool.
yeah,
Very cool. Well,
Awesome.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you taking the time and excited to see what you guys do next.
yeah. Thanks for
Thanks,
having
man.
me. Yeah.